good.
Okay, so environmental issues in real estate. The key is to provide the consumer with information needed so that they can make an accurate decision if they want to purchase the property or not. So it's not our decision if they should purchase it. It's giving the consumer enough good information so they can make a decision. And so you have to look at the physical condition of the property. And when you have physical problems, a lot of times they can be negotiated. So for example, everybody that we sell a house to, we recommend that they get a home inspection. Okay, we recommend that they get a home inspection. And every home inspection has problems with it. And the buyer can look at that home inspection and say, okay, I want to renegotiate something, or I'll take the property as is, or I'll just walk away from it. So full knowledge is the goal, not the condition. It's full knowledge that the consumer has the knowledge of the condition. Then you have environmental conditions. And some are hazardous, some are toxic. There's legal and practical disclosure that has to be done with environmental issues. So let's talk about the word material fact. Material fact is if a reasonable purchaser would consider it in making a decision whether to purchase or how much to pay. So that's the goal. Is there's a problem with a piece of property. Is it something, number one, as a licensee, you dispose of all. Everything you know that would affect the value of that property or would be considered a defect, you disclose it. It's very, very important. If the seller doesn't disclose it, you disclose it. Okay? If you remember that, one key point, and I have to apologize, my sinuses are just getting worse and worse. I should have went home and got a little nasal spray, but I didn't. A defect is a problem with any portion of the property that would have a significant adverse impact on the value or that involves unreasonable risk. The fact that an element or system is near or beyond the end of its normal useful life is not necessarily a material defect. So if you have a roof that's 15 years old, it's towards the end of its life. Roof 15, 20, 25 years. Okay, that doesn't mean it's a defect. If you have a roof that has a hole in it, that's a defect. Does that make sense? Let's talk about some hazardous substances, and I think these may be in your book. On page 34. What page is it in your book?
34.
34, okay. Lex, is that picture of the house on 34 in your book too?
38.
38, so they're a little bit off. So, I'm looking at this picture. You can have mold, lead-based paint. You could have contaminated water. You could have electronic magnetic fields, asbestos, formaldehyde, CFCs from an air conditioner could be leaking. You could have an underground storage tank that's leaking. These are all things that could be a hazard to a property that you have to be aware of. Arsenic, it's a natural element. It's in water, soil, and the air. It's linked to cancer. It's used in pressurized wood. They use it to prevent insect infestation and dry rot. It may leach into the soil and the wood. Let's see what kind of handouts I have. Andrea's going to pass this out about formaldehyde, if you don't mind. And this was, I was watching TV one night and I took a picture of this, and this was on a stock show. Lumber liquidators lost 90% of their stock value because of the risk of cancer associated with laminate flooring that was made with formaldehyde. So you're not going to be an expert in all these things, but you have to keep your eyes open. And if you know that there's a problem, it's the important thing is to disclose it. Asbestos. We run across a lot of asbestos. I've bought houses with asbestos in it. I've sold houses with asbestos in it. It's a fire-resistant material that was commonly used. So if I'm selling somebody a house that has asbestos in it, what's the key? Making sure that they're aware. If you know that it has asbestos, or if you think that it may, or if the seller tells you and doesn't disclose it, you have to disclose it. It's highly friable when it breaks down. Removing it can be expensive. Carbon monoxide. What's that? Yeah, but you as the agent, you're showing Seneca House. You're not going to know. But what you would want to do is say, hey, Seneca, why don't you do this? Why don't you get a home inspection? Why don't you have a home inspector check the place out? That takes you off the hook. And then let the inspector, who's a professional doing that, that's what he does for a living, let him do the inspections. Andrea will tell you, we have a form. We make every buyer in my office. You buy a house from me, you're going to sign a form, and we recommend you get a home inspection.
So that's like after you buy it.
Before you buy it. So when you make an offer on a house, the offer would be contingent upon a home inspection.
Do you have to have that?
No, you don't. But you're going to sign a form saying, I recommend it. Because I don't want you to come back to me after the fact and say, well, the roof leaked. Well, did you have a home inspection? No. Well, I told you to.
Don't some banks get a home
No.
inspection?
No. Some banks require appraisal inspections, different animal. We'll get into that on down the road. Mold, but there's mold everywhere. So you know what I'm saying? I don't know. But it requires moisture, oxygen. There's no public health standards for it, but there's many lawsuits for it. So if you know a house has mold and you want to get it disclosed to your buyer, and then let him make a determination if he wants to purchase the house or not, or if he wants to go any further with it. Lead-based paint. Handout for lead-based paint. I do. I'll have it. They quit using lead-based paint in 1978. So if a house was built prior to 1978, you have to give the buyer lead-based paint. Now, 33 years I've been in the business, maybe 35. I don't know. I quit counting. I've never had a buyer test for lead-based paint.
If you paint over it, it's okay then?
Well, I'm not an expert.
But that's what I thought.
Nope.
No.
Ask an expert. But I can tell you that the bank, when you get a loan, especially if it's a government loan, FHA or VA, they're concerned about lead-based paint. Where's paint come into play as a real estate agent? Paint. Anyway, it's either out government loan, they're going to want that paint scraped, the piece picked up, and there's no place in paint where the kid can grab a piece off there and eat like a potato chip. Licensees, you have to ensure that all parties comply with the law. And, you know, lead paint, if you look at this article, you know, lead-based paint can cause learning. Computer,
Mm-hmm. He said I'll pick it up.
you'll take it to the office.
Yeah.
Just tell me it's slow.
I did.
Ain't it slow?
Yeah.
See, the problem is my laptop, I don't have plugs on the side that we're plugging into this projector. Could we plug into this projector with a HDMI cable?
Possibly. If there's one on the back.
Welcome to the HAR.com Consumer Knowledge Series. In this video, we will discuss lead-based paint disclosures, recognizing that families have a right to know about lead-based paint and potential lead hazards. Lead-based paint disclosures for sales and leases of older housing. How does a lead-based paint disclosure work? Before signing off on a contract for housing, sale, or lease, sellers and landlords must, 1, give an EPA-approved information pamphlet about identification and control of lead-based paint hazards to the buyer. 2, disclosure information such as the location of lead-based paint and/or lead-based paint hazards and the condition of the painted surfaces. Number 3, provide any records and reports on lead-based paint and/or lead-based paint hazards which are available to the seller or landlord. Number 4, include an attachment to the contract or lease which includes a lead warning statement and confirms that the seller or landlord has complied with all notification requirements. Number 5, sellers or landlords and agents, as well as home buyers or tenants, must sign and date the attachment. 6, sellers must provide home buyers a 10-day period. To conduct a paint inspection or risk assessment for lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards. Home buyers may waive this inspection opportunity. Most public and private housing are affected by this rule. Working with a knowledgeable realtor can help make sure you and your family know how to protect yourselves from lead-based paint.
So that's kind of the most important thing. Can you guys all see this screen? You guys up close. Is it too low? Is my computer jamming you up, Squirrel? You guys can see it? So here's a lead-based paint seller disclosure. Okay. We have that attached. We even get the seller to sign that when they do their seller disclosure statements. And the seller will mark, did he ever have any testing done? Yes or no? If he did have testing, was there lead-based paint? Yes or no? And then the buyer says for giving him, does he want a 10-day opportunity? And typically it's in the listing agreement. And then we have to give the buyer a 10-day opportunity plus a pamphlet. Andrea loads up the drawer with those pamphlets, don't you?
Yep.
How to protect your family from lead-based paint. So when a buyer is going to sign a contract with me, I have them sign that form and then I give them the pamphlet. Read this over, make a decision. If before you sign it, you want to do lead-based paint testing. Okay, it's federal law. How many days, Lex, do you have to give the buyer?
10.
Okay. Tammy,
Yes,
if a house was built prior to what year?
1978.
1978. You guys go at it. You are smarter than the average bear.
So now you know something about lead-based paint disclosures, but remember that a realtor has all the information for all your real estate needs.
This is your home.
Okay. Mediated, it has to be by a certified person that's able to do that. Even the scraping and painting. So if I'm selling this building right here, let's say it was a house, because buildings usually don't sell it, government finance, commercial, residential, FHA, or VA, USDA. Had flaky paint here. If I'm the seller, I can clean this up. But let's say the seller can't clean it up. For whatever reason, maybe they're a painter, just scrape it and clean it up. They have to be approved through the FHA for that. Use an approved contractor to do that. So, Bonnie, you guys should all be tipping Bonnie because she took the test. Did anybody else here take the test yet? You've taken the test. So you've taken it twice. With LeadBased Paint, wasn't have anything to do with the instructor, did it?
What?
Didn't have anything to do with the instructor you took the test.
No. But you didn't take a test for me.
What did you see on LeadBased Paint on there? You see the year,
Yeah, I remember that.
1978. Probably that the buyer has to have a 10-day opportunity.
I think something about this, the EPA.
Pamphlet.
Yeah, there was something else on there. I don't remember.
Yeah, you have to give that pamphlet. One of the most important things to.
There was a couple of symptoms that they got the different. Yeah.
Yeah.
What arsenic does to you,
Right.
what lead paint does, like what it causes.
Right.
They kind of match it. I can
Yeah,
remember
I
right.
remember that.
You remember that too? Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And what does it cost? What's the lead-based paint cost? We just went over that a few minutes ago.
Cancer, disabilities, developmental delays, reduced height, poor hearing.
Learning disabilities, here it is right here up on the big board. Development delays, reduced height, poor hearing. Could all be related to lead-based paint. So you're saying you've seen those on the test list?
I want to say I do remember that.
Okay,
I don't remember if it was the quiz in the book.
okay.
I did mine online, I think it was the quiz in the book. It was the actual.
And that's why you gotta do it. I'm glad you brought that up about the quiz in the book. You have to continually take these quizzes.
I want to say a lot of the quiz questions were test questions.
A lot of them were, I'm telling you. I'm telling you. I tell you how to pass this test.
They're tricky, man.
They are.
They do,
But-
weird, weird, so that it confuses you.
They do. It's a shame. But what you have to do is after every chapter, you have to take the quiz. Write the questions on a piece of paper. Don't write them in a book. You can write anywhere in this book you want. It's your book, but don't write them on a quiz and circle the answers. Because then I want you to go back and check your answers. And whichever ones you missed, I want you to go back into that chapter and look them up. So you get a little bit of a foundation of it, right? Then you move forward, and then you want to keep going back and forth taking these quizzes. Keep taking the quizzes, because the quizzes are structured like the state exam would be. And wouldn't you agree that a lot of the questions in the quizzes will be on a state test? A lot of them,
Might be worded a little very similar,
very similar.
especially the test that we have to take like at the end of the course,
Right.
like that big packet that you grade. That was very similar.
That is very similar. And I have a whole box of tests for you guys that I'll give you. No extra charge. You can take them, I'll give you the answer sheets. You can take them and take them over. Lexi, when she was taking her driver's test, I went down to the driver's center, I'll pop up, brought her home the driver's book. Did you ever look at the book? What did you do? You went on your phone and you took it. And there's apps for the real estate too, okay? There's apps for real estate. And I'm gonna, but you're too early in the process for that. When we get a little later in the process, we'll talk about that, those apps. Okay. So there's an app in the App Store. I got an iPhone. It's red and it says real estate. Is that what you did, Lex?
No, it's a nice and simple.
And then there's one that's black that says PA, real estate. Because you gotta remember, there's two tests. There's a state and a national.
Black one?
There's a black one, has a house, and it has PA written on the inside of it.
Also, it's
Pennsylvania,
yeah, not all of them are free.
no. I don't know, I'm pretty, probably didn't pay
The
for it.
PA one is $9.
$9. Money if you don't have to, because I'm gonna give you tests. That you can take home. You can take the test. Grade them yourself. The ones you miss, go back and forth. Does that make sense? So, you spend a lot of money for a class, $450. I don't like to see you spend any more money than you have to. You know,
I think the Dearborn one, part of it's free,
part of it's free for the Dearborn.
you know,
Yeah. So
I think I used it.
yeah, because a lot of people they'll be like doing like maybe taking the kids up at basketball practice, and they don't want to log your book. You can just go right on your phone and just test. That's how that's done. You got the driver's license, right?
Mhm.
You did. Radon gas. Okay, this is something that comes up quite often. Radon gas. Radon's underneath the ground. Okay, and it's just about everywhere. And what happens is the government has a level of 4 picocurie, I think it's called, PCI/L. You may want to know that. The 4 picocuries, because if a house has over that, the government recommends that it's treated. If it's that, there's no government recommendation that it get treated. So if it has 4.1, they're going to say it should be treated. 3.9, you're okay. And the way you treat radon gas, it comes up from the earth. And if you have a basement and you have concrete floor and it got cracks in it, the gas comes up into the cracks. Does anybody here have their house treated for radon? Okay. And how do they treat it, Barney? Tell them how they treat it.
I don't know, they put like this pipe. in
They
the
drill a
basement
hole in the floor.
In the basement.
In the basement, they put a PVC pipe in there, a piece of plastic pipe. So they drill under till they get past the concrete. And then underneath the concrete in your basement floor, there's usually stone.
Yeah.
There's a piece of pipe, plastic pipe in. And they put a fan on the outside. And the fan sucks the radon out from underneath. Radon out from underneath the basement floor. That's how they treat it. So, $100. So you can keep your deal together most of the time. And that's why we recommend that the buyer have not only a home inspection, but a radon inspection. So that they are aware of what they're getting. And they can do the inspection. And then if it's over 4.4 is that, how do you pronounce that? Anybody good at that kind of stuff? Anybody go to 5th grade?
Picuries?
What is it?
Is it picuries?
Picuries? If it's over 4, it's recommended they treat. Jake, you got that? What year, Jacob? LeadBased Paint. If it was built prior to, they have to disclose. They have to disclose. 78.
Safe to live in after you have it vented. Yep.
Yeah.
My son was gonna buy a house and it was so beautiful when the radon was the issue.
To make the buyer any decision. So it's what you never say to a buyer, don't worry about the radon, it's an easy fix.
I mean, it is.
High radon after the inspection, why don't you talk to the radon company and let them explain? Because the radon company tells them, hey, we You don't have explained it. The company tell them, hey, we think you don't make any representations.
No, nothing.
You know nothing.
So why do we have to learn all this stuff?
Hey, here, you know the worst thing is the basement. We're down in the basement and there's a crack in the foundation. And the buyer looks, and the bill agent will say, the buyer will say, oh, we got a big crack here. And the bill agent will say, oh, that's not gonna be a problem. You just back that up a little bit, pay it, that, because you didn't think I can fix everything. We're built that way, right? But sometimes a female agent will say, I don't know what to do with that. You know, the buyer will say, oh, that's not a problem. Up a little bit. So you're better off not giving advice because you're not an expert in that kind of stuff. You're not an expert in it. And when you do, you'll get yourself in trouble. And if you get in trouble, you're not an expert in it. And when you do, you'll get yourself in trouble. And if you get in trouble, your broker gets in trouble. And brokers don't like to get in trouble. Formaldehyde, it's a colorless chemical with strong odors. It's used in a lot of different household products. I passed that thing out about lumber liquidators. It's legally rarely used, but it's still used. If you know a house has formaldehyde in it, you disclose it. Just that simple. Electronic magnetic fields. You've seen them, these big towers. That's one way that it can happen. If you're selling a house and there's high voltage lines very close to it, what would you tell your buyer?
You might not want to fly kites.
What's that?
You might not want to be flying kites on.
May not want to fly kites. What else may you tell them? Sheila?
Oh, could you repeat the question?
Okay.
I was like reading it.
Don't worry about it. If you're selling a house close to high tension lines, you may want to say to your buyer, listen, sometimes these high tension magnetic fields, they can be a health hazard. If you're concerned about that, you need to do your due diligence on it. Let the buyer do his due diligence. But make him aware. And we sell a lot of houses very close to power lines. We sell a lot of houses very close to power lines. But the key is to make the buyer aware. Why, Paul? Make an intelligent decision. Correct? And there's a lot of controversy about it. Licensees should stay neutral. Say, don't give anybody. Say, hey, there's some question about electronic magnetic fields. If you're concerned about the health hazards, you should do your due diligence before you make an offer. PCBs. They're fire-resistant chemical compound used in transformers, motors, caulking compounds. They've been banned since 1979. There's a concern for those. Cleanup is a. Here's a picture of where you may find PCBs. You've seen those transformers on telephone poles, right? Okay. I don't know. If you see one leak dripping, you may not want to go underneath there and stick your tongue underneath. I've really never had a conversation about the PCB. But you need to know that it's a hazardous material. Chlorofluoric carbons used in refrigerants, aerosol spray, paint solvents. They deplete the ozone layer. There's a big thing about that now. So if there's an air, you have to be aware of it. I don't know, was there any test questions about that on a test? I doubt it. But you gotta be you gotta be aware that if somebody has anything that's gonna cool something, a refrigerator or an air conditioner, and it's leaking, that could be a hazardous substance, Lex. I know this is kind of a yucky chapter, but I'm trying to get through it as best I can. They drill down into that, and that's how they have their water for their house, from well water. Now, we live in a big city of Ross Draper, Lex, so we have city water. We call it city water, right? Where there's a pipe that runs down the road, and it goes to everybody's houses. So you have to be aware that groundwater could be contaminated too. So what's the best way to be aware of that? Is if somebody is buying a house that has a well, you would want to recommend that person get the water tested to see if it's drinkable. Oh, the house has a well? Okay. Not only should you get a home inspection, and consider a LeadBased paint and a radar.
Yeah.
But you want to get the well tested. Okay? And then you're giving the buyer the opportunity to do their due diligence. Now, if you know something's a problem, you better disclose it. But it's pretty straightforward stuff. But a lot of different hazards out there. Underground storage tanks. They can be hazardous. Okay? There's 3 million to 5 million underground tanks in the country. Okay? Gas stations, auto repair shops, paint and chemical plants. Many are forgotten about. Many leak. So, and they can contaminate the water supply. So what do you need to know about that if you're a real estate agent? If a tank is at least 10% underground, okay, it's regulated by the EPA. It's regulated by the EPA if it's on top too. I hate to tell you that. There are some exceptions. Less than 110 gallons or less than 1,100 gallons for farm or residential use. So if I'm telling underground tanks, if you're selling a residential house, and did you ever see the somebody that had oil heat that had a tank buried in the ground? If it's under 1,100 gallons, and most of them are, they don't have to be registered. But you can tell the buyer, if you're concerned, you can always have the ground tested. Now, when it's commercial property, when you're selling commercial property, for example, my office used to be a gas station. And when I bought my office, they gave me reports that showed that there were tanks there, and the tanks leaked into the ground, and they had to clean it up. So if somebody's buying a commercial property, and you think that there could have been underground tanks, Sarah, it would be a good idea to recommend them that they do their due diligence to have the ground tested to make sure that there's not a problem. Just that simple. Just that simple. You can see tanks, you see these tanks around, they can be leaking. So you see a tank outside the house leaking, to make your buyer aware, hey, that could be a problem. That's a hazardous material, that oil is leaking into the ground. The underground tanks, you just may see a little piece of pipe sticking up out of the ground. So you're walking around the house, right? You're going to list the house. Is that under an underground tank there? Because you'll see that this is a fill, this is where they put the oil in, and this is like a vent. You know, it can just be a little tap like that. Just be aware of it. And let the buyer, if the buyer is concerned, they can do their due diligence. And here's a picture of one of those residential tanks that was just buried under the ground. that was very popular at one time. Very tanks. Some houses will have those tanks in the basement. Just know that if they're leaking, that could be an environmental issue. And you see the big industrial tanks, you've seen those. So if you're selling some commercial property, you need to be aware of that.
You said if it's 10% underneath the ground fires.
You know what I said with that? I tried to back on that. That's what the slide said. I said I tried to back on that. That's what the slide said. It has to be registered if at least 10% is underground. But I would assume that it has to be registered even if the whole thing's above ground. So I wouldn't worry. Is there something in the book that refers to that? Let's dig into it. Anybody see anything?
Not with the 10%.
Says the regulations apply to tanks that contain hazardous substances or liquid petroleum products and that store at least 10% of their volume underground.
Oh, 10% of their volume.
What page is that? 43.
Page?
Oh,
43.
Okay. We may need to know that 10%. From that.
I would just assume it applies to all. But
It says state and federal laws impose strict requirements on landowners whose properties contain underground storage tanks. The federal UST program is regulated by the EPA. The regulations apply to tanks that contain hazardous substances or liquid petroleum products and that store at least 10% of their volume underground. Some states have adopted laws regulating underground storage tanks that are more stringent than the federal laws. So what they're saying is that if a tank had at least 10% underground, it has to be registered. Is what they're saying.
Say it again.
If a tank, an underground tank is at least 10% of the tank underground, it has to be registered with the EPA.
so the ones that were shown in those pictures that were above ground, they would need to be registered.
That's why I don't like that. I don't know, I bet you they have to be too, what you think. So that's why I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I don't think I would just know that 10%, if it's buried, has to be registered and just call it a day. Don't put too much thought into it. Waste disposal sites. State and federal laws impose strict requirements. Landfills, underground drainage pipes. So understand that if you're selling property that is next to a landfill, that there could be some underground water contamination. Right, Jacob? And if the guy had a well, you may want to have that well water tested. Okay. Capping. I don't know landfills, if you know what capping is, but I know of a couple of sites, and they look like they have a landfill, right? They're dumping all this garbage. Well, they do have one in Bel Vernon, yes. And what they do is they get dirt and they put over top of it when they're done with the project, and it just looks like a big mountain. But there's garbage underneath it. They call that capping. Where they cap it up.
They put dirt over it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny.
I was always
It's not
confused what the
bridge.
garbage was.
Like if you're going valves and you cross over, the bridge is.
That's like when you're at Walmart, but you can see it like.
Yeah,
behind it.
yeah. Yeah, So they're capping over that garbage dump with dirt, and they're that's how they finish the job off. But while they're dumping it, it's open. And then when they're done with it to a point, I don't know what kind of regulations, then they cap it. So I would know the capping, you know? Brownfield. These are defunct, abandoned commercial or industrial sites. A lot of them contain toxic waste from steel and so forth. And they contribute to the decline of urban property values. There's a small business liability relief and Brownfield Revitalization Act that provides funds to assist in the cleanup. So where is there
With the water? Has been around?
no? So anybody ever been to the Cheesecake Factory in Southside? Okay. Did you ever go behind the Cheesecake Factory and walk on that walking trail? Did anybody ever do that? Ellen? That was a brownfield. That used to be a mill. As a matter of fact, the bridge is called the Hot Metal Bridge. So that land there was a steel mill, and nothing would grow. That's why they call it a brownfield. It's contaminated. And they came in, they cleaned that up, and it says right on one of those little plaques, because I happen to be walking on that walking trail, and it says this was a brownfield site that was cleaned up, and there's a nice trail in it. So know what a brownfield is. It's where there was some type of industrial plant there that contaminated the ground in a way nothing would grow there. Anybody from Menneson here? Menneson, I used to work at the Menneson Willing Pittsburgh Steel Mill, and there used to be a BOF there. They made steel, and they tore the plant up. And that, from all that, the chemicals and everything that was used to make the steel, nothing will grow there. They call that a brownfield. Can you get him to sign in?
Yeah, you want them to sign in?
Yeah.
No.
I think Rex has that. Get him to sign in too.
Almost right there.
He can sign in too and sign out for. Okay, environmental protection laws. It's a lot to dig in here, huh? It's a lot.
It's stuff.
They implement laws to protect and they implement laws to protect. Then you have state environmental protection laws. Then you have the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. You need to know that. So make a note, highlight it in there.
What is it? The surplus.
Ciltra.
Circla.
CERCLA.
Citrus.
Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. Since
We're
19,
just right about it.
what's that?
We're just right about it.
Well, you need to know, since 1980,
Yep.
the act is set up to clean up hazardous waste sites and respond to spills, to identify the potential responsible party and order them to clean it up. That's what it's for. So, you ever see on the news where a tanker leaks out oil in the ocean and it comes up on the shore? That's where this act will come in. They're going to identify who owned that tanker, and they're going to be responsible for the cleanup. And they established a $9 billion super fund to help with the cleanup.
Where would this?
Can you go back 1 second?
What's that?
Can you go back?
Yeah.
Where would CERCLA tie into residential though?
It wouldn't, but you could be licensed to sell commercial too.
Okay, so this would,
And what happens if you had a residential property on the water
okay, yeah.
and you had a boat? And the boat had a 500 big houseboat. One, he liked a big houseboat. Right? And it leaked oil. This fund could come into play and they track down who's leaking the oil and make them clean it up.
What if leaked oil ruined your houseboat?
Oh, I don't know about that.
There's gotta be something, you know?
With this liability with this, there's strict liability. Meaning that that it could be joint liability, it could be sole liability, it could be several people could be liable, it can even go retroactive. Back to previous owners could be liable. Landowners are liable under Citra. How do you pronounce it, Lauren?
Circula.
When the release or the threat of a release of hazardous substances has occurred, even if it didn't occur because of the landowner's actions. If it didn't occur because of the landowner's actions.
Because nothing's gonna click until I think on it.
You own a piece of land down on the river. And you have Paul's buddy has a company that has barges and tugboats. And they bring Gutman oil. And the oil comes in from a tanker truck, right? And it comes into Spears. And let's say Bonnie owns the boating company. She don't own land, she owns the boat and the barge. Lexi owns the land where Gutman's oil is. Bonnie brings her barge up to Lexi's land and they're pumping the oil out of Bonnie's boat into Lexi's tanks on the shore. And the boat springs the leak. Lexi can also be liable. Lexi could also be liable for cleanup. And retroactive liability means the liability can even go back to current owners. So it's pretty serious stuff. Do you run across it in the day-to-day real estate? Well, you need it. Did you see this on a test form?
Yeah,
You did.
there's a lot of this on the test, yeah. Like the dates,
So the dates they have to be concerned about was since 1980.
yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes they didn't even,
Okay.
sometimes they didn't even call it Circula. They would say, when was the super fund created or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So read. Dog ear that page. Read that over.
I think the amount of money too. 9 billion, yeah. Yeah.
9 billion. It was established.
And then where's the other one? The amendment.
The amendment comes with
Yep.
Sarah.
I don't know. Something like
I have a video on that. So Sarah came in, this is kind of dry stuff, and they amended the Superfund Act. What's that?
Hers says 1.96 billion, mine says 9 billion.
Maybe they changed it.
We have the same books though, don't we?
You both have 13.
Well,
Yeah.
it may have been amended here. Okay, Sarah come in.
No, under the Circula one.
Oh, really?
Look, come look.
Under the same book.
What does your guys say? Mine says
Okay.
86.
Billion.
Yours says 1.6.
Maybe it's just your slide.
Right here, they added.
No.
The other page.
Good, I like this discussion.
We didn't get an answer yet, so. Where's your circle? Because you're a different page than me. Oh, yours says 1.6.
And then the last one on the bottom is like 8.5.
Well, that's for
Maybe your
Sarah.
slide's just wrong.
Yeah.
From your tables. Let's come up with a conclusion here with
Is
the
my
girls we're
book
talking about.
wrong?
Well, how are we supposed to know when everyone says something different?
Yeah.
They just look it up on Google.
Well, what does yours say? Yours say 1.6?
What am I even?
Yeah.
And then in 1986, it was 8.5 billion.
Yeah. Why does mine say 9 and 8.5?
What am I looking up? What's the question?
I don't know. We
I
gotta
don't know
look
up though.
What page you on? Well, you don't have,
Ours is,
you have the
ours
old
is
book.
page 49. Yours is.
Ellen, you were on that. What's your take on it?
Then in 1980, when it was established, the fund was 1.6 billion, and then amended 86. Amended.
So mine must be saying that,
To eight-
well, that doesn't even total 9.
Amended.
So mine must be saying that,
To eight-
well, that doesn't even total 9.
No.
would be
Here, let's get
It'd be
this out.
two different.
In 1986, the SARA Act increased the super fund to 8.5.
It'd be two different funds.
So mine says 9 billion and then 8.5, but the difference is 1.6 to plus
What
8.5.
book do you have? Do you have the new one?
Hold on. Page.
So does she, and hers says 1.6, and yours says 9, like mine.
But it says increase 2. not
Yeah,
increase
No, it says establish a fund of $9 billion called the super fund.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you go to the SARA Act, it says the super
We'll just
fund
miss that one
increased to
question on the
8.5. We're all gonna be confused.
Hopefully they don't have both of those numbers on there.
Let's Google it. Let's Google it. How much funding is It's 1.6. According to Google, the super fund was created on December 11th, 1980 through the CERCLA. A trust fund was set up of approximately 1.6 billion to pay for cleanup. So our books are wrong.
We will see if there's any errors in that.
I know, but we have the same.
They had
book,
the
though.
same book. I wonder if it was like a different edition or something.
Yeah.
Not edition, but
Well-
like a revised book.
Get
Like
your
one of them was
crap
revised.
together. So mine says,
Like when yours was
I would go
published.
this.
mine says it was printed on April of 2017.
I would say in 1980,
It's 1.6.
it was established,
Yeah.
okay? And it had a $9 billion super fund.
No,
1.6.
it's 1.6.
in 1980.
It was
In
originally
1980.
created with a 1.6.
Well, what, it's different after?
Yeah.
So it's 9 billion after
You guys
1980?
dig into it for 1 minute. I'm gonna be right back.
Go to the front of your books. Go to like the. One more. Alright, so mine says printed United States of America, first revision. Oh.
I think he has
Yours
a,
is a year newer,
yeah, I bet it's a different,
17.
I bet that 9 billion was wrong.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of money.
I missed the question on the test then. Yeah, I don't know if I did
He
or
needs to
not.
change the slide. It was the 1.6.
So it's 8.5 and not 9?
No, the CERCLA, when it was originally created, was
1.6. And then they
So
upped
does
it.
this go to 9 then? So is this wrong too? What is your standard, Sarah?
I bet it went up.
EPA.gov says it was
8.5.
increased to 8.5 billion.
Yeah, it was 1.6 to 8.5, I think.
Where's he getting 9?
Maybe it was in one of the older Because this was from 2000.
Yeah, 1.6 to 8.5.
I might have been wrong in the books.
Maybe we'll probably know.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Let's see if we can get some clarification on that.
It was 1.6.
Yeah.
1.6.
It was not
to
9.
8.5.
Is that what it was?
According to Google, yeah.
I bet it was a typo in the
You
books.
guys, Dave Wilhelm,
Yes, sir.
is this the #1 instructor for Alex House Real Estate? I got you in front of a class of about 20 very enthusiastic pre-licensing class members, and there's a question about the Sarah Super Fund,
No, the CERCLA
the CERCLA.
fund. When it was
What do you know about
created,
it?
CERCLA was established in 1977, I believe it was, to clean up hazardous sites like Brownfield.
Okay.
do you remember how much money?
They put $9 billion to the account. And basically, there was hazardous sites the government would go in and they would pay to clean this up. And then they would go after the small sites. And under CERCLA, there was 9 different parties. Everybody was guilty.
Okay.
And then, there was a transport it, so the other property after it's already there. Nobody's innocent. It was on your property, and it was getting to the property, it was guilty.
Well, when they started that, did it start at 1.8 million and it got kicked up to 9 billion or something like that? That was the question.
And it started at 9 billion, then Sarah was, they did Superfund Reauthorization Act. That is where they created an innocent party, and they put 45 billion into it.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
There's a million typos everywhere.
Okay. You clarified it for us.
I would go with Dave.
On Google, nothing on Google says 9 billion.
Okay, Mr. Wilhelm, I just figured I'd pick your brain for a second because there's some controversy still here at the class. I think the number they need to know is the 9 billion was established in 1980.
1977.
Yeah, my slide says, okay, 1977.
The book says
The
1980.
book says 1982.
Reauthorization Act.
That's what we look it up now.
Okay. Okay, hopefully,
That's where the 45 billion came in.
okay. Thanks, Davey.
All right.
Love you like a brother. Okay,
I think he's wrong.
I think we're still confused a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't matter.
I think it was printed in books wrong.
The EPA was 8.5 increased,
It wasn't enough money. It was 1.6 and they increased it.
or from the, yeah.
What do you think, Ellen?
I mean,
You're
think about
quiet,
it.
But you look like you know something.
I think that it was created with 1.6 and then increased to 8.5. And if you look at it today, then it should be closer to the 9 billion.
That they're talking about.
Total,
Okay.
I'm on the EPA.gov site.
closer to the 9 billion.
That they're talking about.
Total.
Okay.
I'm on the EPA.gov site. And it says,
Sounds pretty official.
the CERCLA was established in 1980. It doesn't say the amount, but then in 1986, the SARA was the 8.5.
Okay.
So that's right. At least 1986 is right.
Well, listen, I can't answer that question because I don't know. And Dave was a little bit all over the place too with it, huh?
Yeah, where's
Yeah.
1977?
I have a 4-letter word for something like that. Next.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing is that the strict liability that Dave talked about, that if anybody had anything to do with anything, they were part of the problem.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with it. Strict liability means that the owner is responsible to the injured party without excuse, period. And joint liability, each of the individual owners would be personally liable. And retroactive, it would even go back. It would even go back. So let's get off of that. I'm sorry that my video didn't work. I think it's 5 after 2. I think we need a break. Yeah, CERCLA was the initial, then Sarah was the amendment to it.
So now it's Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah was the amendment to it. Take 10 minutes, guys.
I have a quick question real quick.
Yeah,
about that.
that's-
Go ahead.
With the amendment, with Sarah, it says it created an innocent landowner immunity. How's that tied to the district?
Right.
That's something you can worry about.
Well, just know that Sarah created the innocent landowner immunity. Take 10 minutes, guys.
I'm gonna go with the 1.6 million. The website would be accurate, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. What's what happens when we make complaints?
Okay. You're here. You got started. Right?
Yeah, and it seems like I'm already.
Increase the
I
size
feel
of the
my head
trust
on
fund.
stuff. So at that point.
Okay. Okay. Now, you signed in,
I
right?
signed in from 24 apparently.
Yeah.
So how does that work? You gotta have a certain number of hours.
Well, you're gonna need,
They estimated future
75.
costs to be 9
so
billion.
you're allowed to miss
Yeah.
80%.
So that's-
Typo in this book then.
So
That's
you
probably
paid for the
why
course,
they,
right?
Yeah.
You paid for the course.
Yeah.
You paid for the course.
Upped
So
it.
I have to track your hours. Underneath
that's
that,
the
you'll
only
be
thing
okay.
I came up with. It was
What I
actually
want
from
you
a
to
book.
do is,
Yeah.
I want you to go home tonight, and the first half of the session, we have on our YouTube page,
Oh, you do?
Howard Hanna Simon.
There's 3 of them.
YouTube.
Got it figured out.
And I want you to listen to
Yeah,
what
it
we went
says
over. And that's
officials
gotta be a
estimated the
homework
cost of
assignment for you.
future efforts to be totally 9
Okay.
billion.
Your name tag, keep it with you. When you leave, put it in your book. When you come back Thursday, bring it with you, too.
But it started at 1.6.
So what are you coming up with, Andrew? We still
It-
talking about that?
It said that they estimated future costs to be at 9 billion, so that's why they upped it to the 8.5. That's the only
But the
way
correct- the
I found
correct was created with 1.6 million, and then the Sarah was the 8.5
Kick it up.
in 1986. And the 9 came from.
It says the New York State environmental official estimated the cost of future cleanup efforts to be 9 billion.
Oh, yeah. See, and Dave must be going off the book too then.
Well, there's a lot out there because the one year they paid 14.9.
Right.
They had a lot of cleanup.
Yeah. That makes sense. Trying to clean up a big tanker truck in the middle of the ocean. 70's a mess still by my house.
Really?
There was a tractor trailer.
I know my friend just sent it to me. I'm like, I actually saw
Yeah.
that earlier.
I don't know what the heck. And then I guess there was another accident.
That's right off the spear, like right or
It's before
North
Spears.
Bell Vernon.
Yeah. Yep. I heard it when I was leaving this morning.
Really?
I heard this loud bang, and my dad's like, "Did you drop upstairs?"
I hate 70.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
they needed
this-
to widen that a long time ago.
So I don't know if that tractor trailer just
Who
lost
knows? A
control.
lot of those truck drivers just don't know how to drive. It's crazy.
He had to have been going eastbound because he's facing eastbound on the median. Swerve, or I don't know. But they're routing all the traffic eastbound up
North Bell
above the
Vernon.
exit and crossing back over by like the Dairy Queen and stuff.
That's crazy. Yeah, because once that gets backed up, it's so hard to
Yeah.
catch up. It takes forever.
Yeah. But they had to take like a chunk of the median out, move that all cleaned up. I mean, he like demolished the median.
Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, maybe he fell asleep. I don't know, but it does look like there's 2 cars that were involved. Oh wait, it wasn't a tractor trailer truck. It was a salt truck. Looks like a salt truck. Still scary. At least I heard. She like those mamas.
Hey, did Casey call you?
No.
He was just at the office to get the laptop.
They were too.
What's that?
He just stopped at the office to get the laptop.
What you tell him we were using it in class?
Yeah, I did. Well, Liz texted me and I said, I told him after class.
Well, he probably didn't know what time.
Well, yeah. He could have texted me. He must be done for the day because he said he was going to pick it up when he was done for
Tell him
the
to
day.
text him.
He said just to call him whenever you leave.
Okay. We got 1, 2, 3, 17.
Did everybody come?
What's that?
Did everybody
No.
come?
There's like 3 or 4 over there that didn't
That's
show.
what I saw with this.
Do you guys like it spaced out with the round tables? That works. It gives you just a little bit more room, makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Versus if we were all lined up.
Makes it seem more open, I guess.
What's that?
We can talk better, I guess.
Can you?
Yeah.
Because usually we line them up, and he asked me if we could do the round tables.
For social distance.
It just keeps it a little bit more
Yeah.
separated.
I'm just happy we don't have to.
Oh,
Same, when I was walking in the. I
What do you
thought
about
here, and I
it?
was like, no. I'm not about it.
Okay, let's get through these next couple of slides, and then we're gonna do some testing. Let's talk a little bit about the Safe Drinking Water Act. It was established to protect public health by regulating public drinking water supply. The EPA sets a national health-based standards for drinking water. In Pennsylvania, disclosure statements require identification of the source of the drinking water and the seller disclosure. So the seller disclosure will say, where's the drinking water come from? And the seller has to put, is it public water, well water, cistern water, spring water? The Clean Water Act governs discharge of oil and hazardous substances into streams, rivers, and harbors. Okay? There's also a Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899, and it permits for building wharfs, piers, and other structures in water outside established harbor lines. Coastal Zone Management Act. It addresses coastal environmental problems. So these are some of the different water acts. Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. There's federal laws regulating the EPA. So there's federal laws, there's state laws. The state has a DEP that oversees state law. So I would know, who does the DEP oversee, federal or state? State. Who does the EPA? Federal. No, the EPA is federal. DEP is for state. The Sewage Facility Act. If the property is not serviced by public sewage and there's no community sewage system available to the property, then a permit for an individual septic must be obtained. So if you have a raw piece of land, let's say this table is a raw piece of land, and there's no community sewage that services this property. I mean, there's no city sewage or community sewage line that runs along it where the property owner could tap into it. And you're selling that, and there's a lot of that out here because there's a lot of rural. Then they have to get a permit before you can close on that sale. The buyer needs to get a permit stating that he could put a septic system on that, an individual septic system on that property. So that's kind of important to know. You know, if somebody's buying a vacant piece of land, you got to tell them, hey, listen, you got to make this contingent upon you getting a permit before you close on the land, or you may close on the land and find out you can't put a septic system in. That can happen because all land doesn't pass for a septic system. So you need to know that if there's no community sewage available to a piece of property, that a permit should be obtained for an individual system on there. And you go to the town, anybody ever hear of perk testing? There you go. That's what you do. You go out and perk test it. The township or municipality that you're in sends their guy out. They do the testing, and they give you a permit. Then you go to an engineer, and he tells you what kind of system to put in. You ever hear of a SAM mount? That's where a SAM mount septic system would be in play. Clean Air Act. To regulate air emissions from stationary and mobile sources. It can significantly affect property owners and businesses. And it applies standards to chemical use in air conditioning, cold storage, refrigerator, and appliances. So did anybody here ever have their air conditioners serviced? Okay, when you get your air conditioner serviced, if you need to get a new air conditioner, they can't just let the gas that's in that air conditioner unit go up into the air. It's against the Clean Air Act. So they have to capture that gas that's in there, suck it out, then change the units out. And the Clean Air Act would oversee that. So where's the liability for real estate agents? The seller carries most of the liability because the seller knows more about the property. But let me tell you something. If you know that there's a problem with that property, regardless, you need to disclose it to the buyer in writing. If not, the licensee can be liable. Discovery of environmental hazards. So we've talked a lot this whole chapter, and it's been a long, dry chapter this afternoon, hasn't it? Is it just me, Christine? No. License, you guys are expected to know about real estate. You're not required to discover if there's a problem and do the due diligence. That lies on the buyer. Okay? But you have to encourage, this is the biggest thing, your job as a real estate agent is to encourage the testing and make the offer contingent upon doing that testing. How many times did I tell you, we tell our buyers, we require that we make them sign a waiver that states that we recommend that they get a home inspection. That's your job. Hey, listen, it's not your job to know if the roof leaks, to know if the groundwater's contaminated, if the septic leaks, if there's radon gas. Your job is to encourage the customer to do the testing. That wasn't a long chapter. So we got three units, okay? Let's see if we could take 5 minutes and stretch a little bit, even though we just did. And I'm going to